Hey, Dr. Tara Vossen-Kimper here. You're listening to the Culture Focus Practice Podcast. And today's episode is Stop Playing Cleanup, how to build a team that actually takes ownership. You know, it's exhausting. I know that I'm not talking to myself here. In leadership, there are absolutely moments where you will feel like you are constantly cleaning up after your team, that you're constantly putting out fires, that you're constantly babysitting, micromanaging, having to follow up and track every little thing that somebody is doing. This is not leadership the way that it's intended. That is taking way too much ownership of something where your team should likely be stepping in to take ownership. And I shouldn't say where your team should be stepping in. I think that's probably part of it, but we're going to focus on us. We're going to focus on what leadership can do to allow the team to step in to take full ownership. So one is that this is not realistically, this isn't going to be a new topic to you. I know that I fall and prey to this. I absolutely have done the most. I have been extra in a lot of moments in my life, and especially when it comes to team related things where I will step in and do something that I probably shouldn't have. This is an ongoing point of assess and amend for myself. So I'm going to lead with that. What happens if we are constantly stepping in? So why this matters, I guess, is ultimately what I'm trying to point out right here is that if you are taking ownership of something, if you are not allowing your team to take ownership and you're stepping in constantly, that's not leading, that's babysitting. And if you're doing that, you are removing yourself from where you need to be. So it means that you're not in the role that you should be in. You are now you're flirting with or stepping into all these other roles and doing things that don't actually live within the responsibilities of your own role. So one, it takes you away from what you should be doing. Two, I would say it feels disempowering for your team. That's just an additional thing here, but you end up bucking your team over because you're kind of um, taking their ability to fix something. You're removing it from them, taking it back, which sends a signal of distrust, distrust, says, I don't trust you to them. How about that? And it just ends up feeling like babysitting. You can't grow things or focus on growing things or focus on your vision or ensure that you're charting the right course if you're constantly in cleanup mode, babysitting mode, task mode. So welcome. If this is your first time, we're going to get straight into it. There's just a few things. There's three sort of broad themes we're going to cover here. One is how we end up falling into cleanup mode, how leadership ends up falling into cleanup mode. Two is mindset shift. So what are the things we need to do that we need to start internalizing or embracing or just keeping in mind as we shift into out of babysitting into leadership and, empowering our team to do more. And then three is how do we build a culture of ownership by our practice? I don't necessarily mean you own it. Maybe you're in leadership, but at the practice that we're at our group practice. So practice owners tend to fall into cleanup mode I'm going to just talk about four things. I'm sure there are a variety of other reasons why people fall into this mode, but I'm going to talk about four. One is just default helper mode. Just by nature, you might be somebody prone to helping. You might want to fix it. You might want to solve the problem. Somebody comes to you with something and you're like, well, let's do this. And you might just immediately sort of shift into fixing or logistics or, well, this is how we deal with it right away. And you pass that over to them and then you feel good and they feel good. Everyone's relieved and it's done. So you might be a default helper. Totally fine. I get that. I get it honest. Totally fine. Two, you might lack clear expectations. So if things are not clear, and by things, I mean systems, processes, roles, responsibilities, expectations around outcomes. If those things are not clarified and communicated, then they can't be lived up to. They can't be, there's no attempt to attain them, if that makes sense. So it could be that there is a lack of clear expectations. This can be internal, like you don't know what you expect. If that's the case, that obviously can't be communicated. But I would say sometimes it is clear internally what you expect and it's not communicated. So it could be that you don't know and therefore it's not communicated. Or it could be that you do know, but it's not communicated. So default helper mode is one way that we fall into cleanup. Lacking clear expectations is another. A third is having a fuzzy or not very clear accountability structure. I love a good accountability chart. I love a good accountability chart. If you don't have accountability, and so this could be accountability chart, but it can also be structure in terms of like processes, systems, etc. You might really want something to get done, but there's nothing in place to ensure that it will. And so that's where that accountability structure, if that's lacking, if it's not clear, if it's not, again, communicated, I would say, then things are going to fall through the cracks and slash or something won't get done and you'll end up doing it, or you being leadership will end up doing it. That is something and I think to make to make matters worse, when to add salt to the wound, whatever, you know, little phrase you want to use there. If there is an accountability structure, excuse me, I know for myself sometimes what will happen is that I will notice something. I'll note, oh shit, this doesn't, fuck, this person should be doing this thing. And I'm in the middle of doing other things and I might just do it and then think to myself, I got to tell them that. And then I don't ever tell them because then it's just done. That's so ridiculous. I know it's ridiculous. It happens way, you know, very rarely at this point does that happen, but it will still come up and it will still happen. And you just fall into the getting it done. Like, I'm just going to get this done really quick. But that points to a lack of accountability. That points to not having clear expectations around certain things or not having keyed in systems or processes. Okay, so that's the third thing, lack of accountability, or not lack of, maybe unclear accountability structure. Again, systems, processes, accountability chart, etc. The fourth thing why we can fall into this trap of being in cleanup mode is that we're afraid of being too harsh. We might really think that we're going to hurt somebody's feelings. Oh, I'm going to hurt their feelings. I don't want to tell them what to do. Oh, I get it. I mean, I really do get it. I don't like telling people what to do, even though I want to practice. I don't like telling people what to do. I don't like it. I don't want to be told what to do. I don't like telling people what to do, which is ridiculous, but it's true. So there's something around, I don't want to be too harsh. There's like a fear of being too harsh whenever you're interacting with people around ownership. Or so instead, you might just clean up whatever needs to be cleaned up instead of saying like, hey, I need you to do this thing. This thing is actually your responsibility. So it needs to happen. So those are four sort of common reasons why people fall into cleanup mode. I'm curious, if you think about those again, I'll relist them, but think about which ones you recognize in yourself. Like, what are the things that I tend to do? Are you the default helper? Do you lack clear expectations? Are you unclear about your accountability structure and thus maybe uncommunicative about it? Is that the right word? Not communicative about it? Or is there a fear of being too harsh? Or all of them? Say, well, actually, 3 of the 4 sound like they fit with me. It's cool, man. It's cool. Just bear with me. Let's keep getting through this and we'll figure out how we can work through this whole thing, getting out of cleanup mode and into, building that culture of ownership. So those are the things that we do that land us in cleanup mode. Then these are the things we need to mentally shift whenever we're thinking about helping people take ownership. One is that we need to start thinking of ourselves as facilitators of problem solving, not problem solvers or fixers, but facilitators of. I might not be the one who solves the problem. I will help you. I will facilitate the maybe process for you to solve. I will remove some of the barriers for you to solve. I will help guide you to come to an outcome that solves the problem, but I won't be the one to fix it. Second thing, this is an EOS concept, a Gino Wickman, a traction concept. We have to let go of the vine. So we basically have to trust that other people are going to take ownership. With that said, so let me back up. If we are taking ownership of something, that means somebody else is not. So we have to let go of ownership at some point in order for another person to step in and effectively take ownership. That's what I mean when I say let go of the vine. Again, not my language, EOS concept. With that said, you cannot let go of the vine until you have the other things in place, like the expectations, like the accountability, et cetera. So we will talk about that in a second. If you brought somebody onto your team and you said, hey, welcome, it's your second day, you're responsible for this, fucking figure it out, you're letting go of the vine way too soon. We have to set people up in order to take ownership of something effectively. We can't just give it to them and expect them to figure it out. So there is a transition process. There is ensuring that they're able to take ownership. But at some point, when all the cards are set up, you got to step back and let them play the hand. Like, you have to step back. So we have to be willing to let go of the vine at some point. Third thing. So again, we've got becoming a facilitator of problem solving, letting go of the vine when appropriate. And this is my favorite. I love letting people grapple with things. That is the third thing. Let people grapple. You know, you could say let people struggle. Grappling is struggling, but grappling feels like it's this intentional, purposeful, you have this thing you're trying to do and you're struggling to get it done, but you know what you're after. A struggle just seems like you're struggling and you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You're just on a struggle bus. You're just struggling with something and you can't make sense of it. If we are setting people up for success and to take ownership so we can shift out of cleanup mode, then we might set clear expectations. We'll talk about building that culture of ownership. And a person might grapple with a lot of concepts or grapple with figuring out, how do I get there? That's theirs to own. If we can facilitate problem solving, if we are letting go of the vine at the right time, we have to also be okay with letting people grapple with a problem or a concept or a system or a responsibility, knowing that, of course, we're going to be there to help, give the right amount of support in order for them to make that leap up or make that step up or, make that next move. But we can't take over the problem that they're trying to solve. Again, that goes back to being disempowering. And also, when you're grappling with something, that is building muscle. You are building your ability to solve problems in the future. So when we step in too soon, we disempower people. We take away their agency, their sense of authority. We take away their ability to build the problem-solving muscles that they're going to need to support the practice. So disempowering. So letting people grapple, as painful as it might feel for you, is very intentional and purposeful, and it is very beneficial when done well. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So those are mindset shifts. Like I said, facilitating problem solving, letting go of the vine, not my concept, again, EOS concept, and letting people grapple. Now let's shift over. Well, we can shift on, we can shift over, we can shift at, we can shift to, we can shift up towards. Now let's shift to how to build a culture of ownership. So 4 key things, they're all going to feel familiar now because we've talked about each of them sort of indirectly throughout this whole episode. So first and foremost, and we're going to go over, there's 4 things here and they're all going to sound familiar at this point. So yeah, good. They should sound familiar because we've sort of been talking about them throughout this episode. Number 1 is setting clear expectations. If you can clearly define a role and the responsibilities that are part of that role, if you can clearly define a system or a process or an outcome or your expectations about somebody's role in a system or whatever that might be, we have to communicate that to the person. So not only do we need to set clear expectations, again, that's internal, but also we need to communicate that with the person, the other party, or the other parties if there are multiple people, excuse me. A really good way of doing this, or I don't think it's a cheat or a hack necessarily, but something that can be effective is having measurable outcomes. So basically you saying this is what this looks like if it's successful, and setting that and then letting people do that on their own. So here's your starting point. Here's where we want to be. People can navigate that on their own. And if they can't, we can step in and support them. Again, facilitating problem solving, letting people grapple, being supportive when we need to be, though, of course. So number 1 is setting those clear expectations. Again, whether it's through clear definitions about roles and responsibilities, or whether it's through having very measurable outcomes about what the success of a thing looks like and, being communicative about all of those things. Number 2, we need to be able to hold people accountable. And ideally, we're doing this without being or feeling like an asshole. Accountability is not micromanagement. So this doesn't mean you're on top of, you don't need to be on them. What's the phrase, like white on rice? You don't need to do anything like that. We're not here to breathe down somebody's neck or Yeah, not anything like that. But we do want to have regular check-ins about what somebody might be doing, what plans they have in terms of getting to that outcome, what they we don't want to say, here's what you need to do, but we want to know what they have planned and in mind. So we're there again, sort of staying in tune with what's going on and how they're moving towards the outcome, but we are not telling them what to do, excuse me, and we are not following every single tiny minuscule step of the way. That's exhausting, first of all. Second of all, that's going to feel really micromanaging for the people who are on the other side of it. I think if somebody, as a caveat, if somebody is continuing not to take ownership of a role when you start to do this accountability piece, you don't have, and you've set clear expectations and you are, you're doing the right things with the mindset and holding people accountable and you're trying to like empower them, you might have a people issue. And so that actually points to a different type of conversation about hiring or people or values or whatever. That's an entirely different conversation. But let's assume you don't have a people issue, then holding people accountable, you can do it without being micromanaging. So again, if somebody's not taking ownership consistently and you're checking all of your boxes, probably points to a people issue. That's a different conversation. Number 3, empower decision making. Don't be a bottleneck. I am so fucking notorious for being a bottleneck that I have learned over time and with the right people around me, I slow things down. When all the decisions have to be made through you, guess what? All the decisions have to be made through you, which means it all goes through this very narrow funnel. And if you're busy doing shit that you should be doing, like visionary things or leadership things, you shouldn't be spending your time making decisions for people in other roles. We should ideally be empowering them to make decisions in their roles. You've set clear outcomes, excuse me. You've set what measurable outcomes look like. You've stated clearly what success looks like. You've set clear roles and responsibilities. Let them do their job. Step out of the way. That's what empowering looks like. So instead of telling them, this is what you should do, instead of saying, come to me with all of your options, I'll make the decision for you, give them guidance, let them solve the problems. This is where the grappling piece comes in. People will make decisions that you do not agree with, assuming it's not going to cost you a fuck ton of money or cost the practice a bunch of money, or that it's not totally disrupting a well-run system for no reason. Let it happen. Let people make mistakes. Let them learn. That's also how learning takes place. And then be there to process, okay, cool. What went wrong? What do we need to do a little bit differently next time? So we want to help teach problem solving. That's part of empowering decision making, is helping them problem solve without telling them directly what to do. So when someone comes to you and says, and again, this is something I have had to learn. I have had to learn about myself and in working with leadership, of course. When somebody comes to you and says, this is what's up, then I might say, this is a problem I'm having. My first inclination is going to be to talk shop and troubleshoot and be like, oh, that's interesting. I'm wondering about blah, blah, blah. Like I might be starting to think out loud about what I would do. And I have to stop myself and say, hang on a second. What do you think? One, what do you need from me? That's a question I ask a lot. What do you need from me in this? Are you needing some like ideas? Are you needing like just some emotional space? What do you need from me? 2, if they say I really want some ideas, I might say, okay, cool. Tell me what you're thinking first though. What are ideas you've come up with? What have you thought about trying? Where's your brain at? Where's your mind at? What direction are you thinking about going? I want to hear from them first. 1, with regard to what they need from me, because sometimes people just come because they need to tell you what they're thinking and they want to know if they're on the right track. Cool. If I didn't know that in advance, I don't know what I might do. I might not pick up on the cue and then go in a totally different direction. So 1, it's asking, what do you need from me? 2, if they know, they might not say, I don't actually know yet. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, let's work through this then. And you might ask about logistical or emotional or barrier based, is there anything in the way? What's happening? 2, ask them first how they might seek to solve this, or how they might remove the barrier, or what they see as the problem, how they might fix the problem, what they're thinking about doing. And then you might chime in and say, yeah, we're on the same page. This is my little, I might, I was thinking this, which seems right in alignment with what you're doing. So go with your route and see what happens. So that's what empowering decision making can look like, where instead of answering first and, responding to the call, so to speak, you are getting it from them. Tell me first what you think. And you could take it a step further and say, you know what? That sounds great. Just go with it and not even share anything that you're thinking in response. Say, no. I trust you. I trust you in this role. You know what's expected. You know what the outcome should be. Do it. Do what you think is best. And a worst case scenario, it doesn't work. And then we figure out what you could have done differently. Who knows? Maybe it does work. And newsflash to you, people are going to have better ideas than you. You might be really fucking smart. I'm saying this to you. I'm not saying that you should say this to your, don't say this to your team. I'm saying this to you right now. People are better at things than you are. Not everybody is better at everything, obviously. You're going to be better at some things than others. You're going to know more about some things than somebody else, but your leadership team, your team, they will be better at key things. So if I know that I don't always know best, I'm going to trust people to do things, even if I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's going to work. Try it out though. If it does work and it works better, it's fucking awesome. If it doesn't work, and again, it doesn't cost a crap ton of money or disrupt the entire practice or tank morale, then who cares? Then it's a learning experience. And that's where again, we're getting back to empowering decision-making and agency and all of those things. So I'm going to keep going now. So again, 4 ways to build a culture of ownership: setting clear expectations, holding people accountable, empowering decision-making. 4th thing is creating a feedback loop. You don't know me, or you do know me. I don't actually know. I don't know who you are, who's listening, but if you do know me, you know that I like feedback. If you don't know me, now you know I like feedback. I like feedback loops. I like to know what's going on. I want there to be a constant input of feedback coming in because it's an input, and because that input of feedback is going to adjust whatever is happening in the system. So it should be this kind of constant feedback loop where you're sending a message out or you're sending something out, you're getting a response back. So in doing this, I'm sorry, how this looks, it might be where you have just regular check-ins and you say, okay, cool. And by regular, I mean like on a weekly basis, depending on if this is project-based, it could be a 15-minute standing check-in. It might be embedded in a larger meeting that you have, but you might say, okay, tell me what's working. Tell me what's not working. Tell me what you think we can do better. Tell me one thing that I'm not doing that you want me to do that would be helpful. Tell me what I'm doing that you want me to continue. You're asking questions where you're fostering feedback. You're getting information from them about anything really related to maybe the project they're working on or the thing that they're responsible for. And in doing this, an indirect benefit, assuming that you're handling that feedback well. So if you are getting feedback from somebody and you respond with defensiveness after you've invited it, you are killing that relationship. You are killing that safety, that emotional, psychological safety. If somebody's giving you feedback and they're not doing it in a contemptuous way, they're not doing it via name calling or scorn or, contempt, dismissiveness, condescension, etc., you should hug them. And if you're feeling all prickly on the inside, take a fucking minute and then come back and hug them and say, I really, really appreciate you giving me that feedback. It's hard to hear. It's hard to hear, but I need it. And I really value that you can be honest with me. Boom, psychological safety. And, I mean, ideally, you actually do believe that. And if you don't, I would say, hey, work on that because you do need feedback to, get better. So we have to ensure with the feedback loop that we are also doing it in a safe way. And again, I said that that's an indirect benefit. When done well, it is an indirect benefit. Like the feedback is sort of the main piece to this for building ownership or building a culture of ownership. But the indirect benefit is that psychological safety when the feedback is received well. So hug your messenger is my point. All right, let's recap then. We covered, what did we cover? How we fall into cleanup mode, which is by being default helpers, by lacking clear expectations, by having an unclear accountability structure, and by being afraid of being too harsh. Guilty as charged. Number 2, our mindset shift. How do we shift our mindset around, solving problems versus allowing people to take ownership? 1, we need to start thinking of ourselves as facilitators of problem solvers and not as problem solvers. I'm facilitating problem solving. I am not solving problems. Number two, we have to let go of the vine. So this is that ownership piece where if we own something, nobody else can. You can't have two owners at the same time. So if I own something, I have to be willing to let it go at the point at which I have all of the other stuff clarified and I trust this person in that role. Boop, I'm letting go of this ownership and they're picking it up. Number three, the mindset is that we have to let people grapple. Again, my favorite thing ever. I don't know. I think I've said before, my background is clinical, clinical therapist. And in training supervisees, it's such a constant conversation where they say, well, I don't want to share what I think because I'm afraid they're just going to listen to me, or I don't want them to feel a certain way, or I blah, 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 or I this. One, you don't have that much power over somebody else. Two, your role as a clinician, your role as a therapist, and I would say your role as a leader, of course, we want people to feel good, but it's not to have people feel good all the time. Life is hard, period. There is hard shit in life. There are horrible things that happen. There are excruciating feelings and experiences and traumatic moments that will forever be seared inside people's heads and brains and hearts and bodies. None of that will get massaged out or healed if you don't grapple with the difficulty of something, if you don't grapple with the difficulty of life. The grappling piece for me is it is absolutely worldwide. It is life-wide. It's like, it has to happen across the board in my life. I expect that it happens everywhere. So I'm saying that we need to be okay with letting people grapple, knowing that in grappling, they are building strength. This does not mean putting 300 pounds of weight on somebody's bar the first time they go to squat or bench. This means pushing them a little bit beyond what they're comfortable with, knowing it's the bar and they can lift this. It's building strength. So let me shift into the 4 points to recapping the 4 points about how to build that culture of ownership. So number one, setting clear expectations. 2, holding people accountable. 3, empowering decision-making. And 4, creating a feedback loop. I hope this is helpful. If you are in a position where you are needing more support, if you are in a position where you are needing more support, join me at the Culture Focus Practice membership. A steal of a price. You get me twice a month live for a training and a Q&A, all the recordings in a private portal. You got a private group you're a part of. Join me there. You can find me at TaraVossenkemper.com and then click on the membership. Additionally, subscribe to the podcast if you just like to hear me talk at you. I love talking about these concepts. If you have something that you especially want me to speak to, or if you are feeling stuck with something and you really want an episode about it, shoot me an email. hello@TaraVossenkemper.com. And if you are really into EOS, I mentioned a little bit about EOS, letting go of the vine. If you're really into EOS, you want to learn more, you want to get into it, join us. I have a free Facebook group. It's the EOS Collective for group practices. So facebook.com/group/EOS Collective. So I hope to see you somewhere. Any one of those places would be awesome. Or just listen to the podcast. Keep listening to the episodes and get what you need from them. Thank you for making this awesome. I will see you next time. Bye.